We're pleased to welcome now the Secretary of State of the great state of Mississippi, Michael Watson. Mr. Secretary, good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Great to be with you, my friend, always. Appreciate the good work that you do. And Rhino.
Yeah, absolutely, Rhino. So we do want to pass on to you. We were just informed that the Lieutenant Governor has looked like he fainted in the chamber there, standing at the podium, presiding over the Senate as the Lieutenant Governor does. And we don't have any other details other than that, but we did want to pass that on, that can be confirmed, people there on the scene, video and so forth. And, man, we hope everything's okay with the Lieutenant Governor. We saw the video of it, and it's kind of wrenching.
Could we maybe take a quick break?
Yeah.
Lord, thank you for this day. As we have seen our Lieutenant Governor collapse at the podium, Lord, I pray that you would bless him, give him the strength he needs, provide him with whatever medical attention he needs, and I pray that you would lift him up and his family. Lord, support Miss Lynn in this as well. Look forward to a great report, and look forward to him getting back to work as soon as possible. In your name we pray. Amen. Appreciate
that, Mr. Secretary. Very appropriate. Good word. So, just wanted to pass that on. Okay, let's turn our attention to what's going on in the Secretary of State's office, the legislature in session. Let's start with any particular legislation you guys need there.
Yeah, we've worked on a few pieces of legislation this year. It's actually been a couple of years running now, and you and I have talked about this before, but campaign finance reform, it's one of the things that we looked at coming into 20 and the process through 2024. And let me say thank you to the legislature. They've done a fantastic job in passing our election integrity pieces. And I think this is kind of one of the last pieces to the puzzle. And this is the back end that people don't really pay much attention to. But I think it's really important for us to make sure that we've got a clear understanding of campaign finance reports, an easy way to search them, making sure that everybody's playing by the same rules, and then enforcement on the back end. So we've put a piece of legislation together that we've worked on a couple of years now. Last year, it got a little bit sideways. This year, it's starting to get a little more traction. So we're excited about that. Appreciate Senator England pushing that through for us on the Senate side. So we're going to keep working with that on the House side and to see what else we can accomplish with it. That's really the biggest piece on elections for us.
Okay.
The second component there would be tidelands. We've talked a little bit about this along the coast.
Yep.
A really important piece. It is state property, and it is our job as a Secretary of State, as a trustee over the public trust tidelands, to make sure that those properties, those parcels, that land, the subject to the tidal flow, are protected, conserved, and when there are chances for economic development, let's make sure we do that wisely. But Mississippians need to get a just return on those properties. So we're working on that to get some clarification on whose job is what, to make sure that the cities and the state and the county and other entities can work well together. There's been a lot of lawsuits that have been filed, as you've probably seen on the coast. So we're trying to get that cleaned up so we can end the lawsuits. Big thing for the state. A lot of people don't know much about tidelands, but it's a big issue for us along the coast, so we want to get that cleaned up. Other than those two really big pieces, there are some smaller things that we're working on, but those are probably the headliners for us.
Okay. So the campaign finance reform, do we have some problems there that we're trying to address? I mean, specifically, there's no secret that right where we are, the city of Jackson here, there's been lots of questions about the finance reports that have been filed by the mayor.
Just filed, by the way.
Right.
And that's one of the issues. So for folks that have been following that, he did not file his campaign finance reports for quite some time. And we passed some legislation last year with the help of the legislature. But basically now when an individual wants to run for office, if they're not up to speed on the campaign finance reports, they are not to be qualified.
Okay.
That's an important hook. That's what forced the mayor this time. He had to file his reports in order for him to be qualified to run. And there are questions about those reports, and I'll let other people dig through that. But the point is, again, that seems like a small little hook. Oh, that's easy. Well, if people aren't filing their reports, you can't hold them accountable. And that's what we've seen in the City of Jackson issue. So This is a broader, what we wanted to do was, let's take FEC, great example. You can easily search the FEC reports on federal campaign finance. You can. It's simple. So we want to bring that system to Mississippi. You may recall we shut down the online filing portal here in Mississippi because it was built on a system that is now 20 years old. You know computers well. It was built probably about 10 or so years ago. It was an add-on to what system we had. So we've gone through the RFP process now, and we're working on building a new system. And what it would do is house a statewide campaign finance report system. From the dog catcher on up to the governor, everyone would file online. So it'd be easily searchable.
Because it's not good now.
Yeah. Here's one. I heard a comment the other day that was said in the Capitol. And basically it was a legislator who said, well, if somebody wants to look at my reports, they can go get them offline and pull them offline and read them on the papers. Why not make it easy for them? Just to go search really easy,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be hard. This is simple. So then we heard, well, not everybody has a computer. So I went over to the Ethics Commission and talked to them about the statement of economic interest that all elected officials have to file. And there are only about 20 folks that don't file it online. So if you can file that online, you can file your campaign finance report online. So I asked them, well, what do you do with the folks that don't file it online? We fill it out for them and upload it online. And I said, well, we'll be willing to do that to the Secretary of State's office. There are 20 folks out there. You sign an affidavit that you don't have access to the internet. I'll do it for you.
Yeah.
Fine. The point there is that Mississippians they deserve to know who's giving who money.
Sure.
Are votes changing based on any of that money that's changing hands? Are positions changing? That's the ultimate back-end accountability for our elected officials. So we're trying to make it easy for them to do that. This would make them file online reports. As the bill is now coming out of the Senate, it went from shall to may. So usually
shall to may. Okay, so it's kind of optional.
You know what that means. The same system right now was a may, and not a lot of folks were using it. Some folks started using it, and there were some errors, and that's why I shut it down, because it's built on an old system. But with this new system, it's going to be easily searchable, readily for our individuals to file on it, and it'd be statewide. Every elected official would file on it. The circuit clerks, municipal clerks would be in charge of the municipal folks filing to make sure that on our system that have access to our system, similar to like SIMS now, where circuit clerks can go in and look at SIMS, have access to it. Same way all the way up, and then obviously statewide, we would be looking at their reports when they file them. The second piece of this is, how do you enforce these laws? As you know now, it's a system where the Ethics Commission has a role, we have a role, and the Attorney General's office has a role. Well, the buck sometimes falls off the plate, and it isn't quite done correctly. We saw some of that in the history here in the last few years. So what we have done is let's streamline that under our umbrella, under the Secretary of State's office. The AG will still have their role of prosecuting should something come out of it. We would send them notice if somebody messed up. They'd have 5 days to tell us, hey, we're going to handle this, or then we could go to the local prosecutor. So it maintains a sense of streamlined enforcement mechanism all under one roof. And it's not this, hey, let me punish this guy or that girl. It is, here's what the law says. Did you file your report?
Right.
Did you not file your report, or did you say this amount of money came from someone here and it actually came from over here? We could do some investigations if there was a credible lead to that. It just brings more enforcement and accountability to the entire process.
Well, and it makes it accessible to the public, which they should be able to access
Ultimately,
on a timely basis.
That's exactly right.
As well.
That's the whole goal.
So, if I'm not mistaken, a fair amount of it requires manual entry on your part. Is that correct?
Well, so that's one of the issues now. The may, when they change from shall to may, you may file it online. But what we're going to have now, think about this. If we've got all municipalities, with 300 roughly or so, I think maybe north of that number, you've got county elections, you've got state elections, you've got whatever. Every candidate in all of these offices are now going to be sending their reports to us. We're going to have to then scan them in, put them on the system. You talk about taking some time, that's going to take forever.
Yeah.
So we're working through that now. Can we maybe include some language that says, you know what, for Pascagoula, that municipal clerk's going to have to upload each of their candidates running for office to our system, so we don't have to do it ourselves. So we're working through that. That's not in legislation now, but something we need to address.
It makes sense to me. I mean, totally does. So, okay, so let's turn our attention to voting. You know, there's a bill that's received lots of attention from Senator Jeremy England, who I believe took your seat in the Senate when you became Secretary of State. And this bill would essentially allow no excuse early voting 15 days prior to Election Day currently in the state of Mississippi. And by the way, all this is detailed on the Secretary of State's website. Very informative because I researched it. But there are 10 valid excuses presently in our law for absentee voting, excuse-based absentee voting. Those are very explicit. 45 days presently in the state of Mississippi. This would convert that to 15 days, no excuse, but the voting process would essentially be the same way that it is on Election Day, right?
Pretty much. We can walk
okay, let's talk about it on the other side of the break. I'm interested in hearing your analysis of that. Secretary of State Michael Watson is in the Element Well studio. We'll be right back. We're back with you in the Element Well studio. Again, just want to pass on that Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann did pass out on the Senate floor. He was presiding over the chamber with business in process. We don't have any other details at this point other than I believe he is conscious and seems to be recovering. And so we are certainly praying for his full recovery and that everything's okay. And we appreciate Secretary of State Michael Watson for kicking off our segment with a prayer, asking the Lord above for comfort and full recovery for the Lieutenant Governor. So, all right, Mr. Secretary, before we went to break, we were talking about this early voting bill. Senator Jeremy England has actually got passed in the Senate. Not sure what the fate of that legislation is in the House. Haven't heard much from the House of it. I felt like I accurately described how it would change the current system. And by the way, a common question that comes up is, okay, would this change or alter any way the current mail-in voting, absentee mail-in voting? I think the answer is no,
It
right?
would not.
No change whatsoever.
Yeah, that's been one of my questions, and I talked to Chairman England last year and told him, look, if you're going to do this, why don't we go ahead and take some of these mail-in options away? You've got 15 days for whatever reason you want. You can go early vote. Well, let's take down some of the mail-in voting, which is where we see typically more fraud than anywhere else.
Yeah.
So perhaps we can get that done in the other chamber and see if there's an agreement on that. There are two versions right now. One from the House, as I understand it, they would have the 45 days of no excuse in person.
In the House?
In the House. So, but it'd be in person, and it'd be, it would have the excuses, but it would be without the envelopes. So you would actually vote on the machine. So making it a little bit cleaner, a little bit more speedy,
more secure, I think.
And a little bit more secure. You don't go through the envelopes. I was talking to Representative Holland this morning, and the technicalities when people maybe not sign across the flap. I hate that the law is a law, but I hate that someone's vote gets tossed out just simply because they made a little bit of an error on the envelope.
The route of their ink pen.
That's right.
Essentially.
So that would clean that issue up. I think that's probably a good idea. On early voting itself, the way that it currently would work. So right now you have 45 days of absentee voting. There are specifically 9 reasons, but one of them is there are 2 reasons in the same one. So it makes 10.
That's where I got 10.
So you're right. And there are 4 reasons for mail.
Okay.
So those we'll set those aside. This would basically take out any excuse for in-person. So you would come in, you wouldn't have 45 days anymore, it would just be the 15 days for that piece. Mail would still exist. The mail-in voting would still exist for those 4 reasons.
Okay.
So it would be in clerk's offices. It would be administered by the clerks. Essentially what it would be is a precinct within the clerk's office. Now, one of the issues here is you get this small county courthouse, and if people shifted more from going in person because they knew now they could early vote, you're going to swamp these clerk's offices. They're going to need more help, which requires more money, which requires some of the security issues then. We better nail these down on the front end before they get there. So the logistics piece is what's really concerning to me. In person in the clerk's office is probably, I wouldn't say probably, is the second, safest vote that there is. On Election Day, in the precinct, without a doubt, is the safest vote cast.
Okay.
I'm a bit old school. I love that. So anything that takes away from that, I typically would approach with a little bit of caution. I'm not saying you can't do it correctly. Look at Florida. Look at other states that have done a great job with it. So I get that. If people want to support that, that's a debate for the legislature and the people of Mississippi. If the legislature tells me to do it, then we're going to do our best to make it secure. So that's the second safest vote. I get it. You want to make sure you got good clerks in office that are going to be overseeing this process. The question becomes then, how many people are going to switch from voting on Election Day to early voting? If that's a big number, you are going to have logistics nightmares for our circuit clerks. They have voiced that to me, And so I've told Senator England and a few others, you better address these logistics on the front end, because you're going to have a hard time with our clerk's offices if this thing grows to what we may expect. Early voting does not increase turnout. You will not see a large increase of people coming to vote. That just doesn't happen. There's not a report out there that says that's the case. It's a convenient factor. And so if it's more convenient, you have more people coming in. That's the piece where the logistics questions are going to come in. Those aren't specifically addressed in the bill. So that's something that we're going to have to deal with. The question then becomes, well, do you do it regulatory at the Secretary of State's office, or do we want to make sure we kind of nail it down in the legislation? You know, it depends on how you look at things. I prefer it being nailed down in legislation. I don't know who the next Secretary of State will be. Maybe a great person, who knows? But as long as we have some faith and understanding of the rules and regulations and can make it safe, that's my position. I want to make it as safe as possible. So, legislature sends it over, then we will deal with it then.
Yeah. So, I guess one question that comes to mind is you pointed out rightly that numerous other states, I think it's 47 if I'm not mistaken, have some form of early voting, right, for some period of time.
Yeah, so let's clear that up.
Okay.
47 states have some type of voting before Election Day.
Okay.
Is it absentee with excuse? Is it pure early voting with no excuse? I think that's where the numbers change a little bit.
Right.
But for the global understanding of can people vote before Election Day, 47 states have some type of that.
Okay.
It may not be early voting. It may be absentee with an excuse, but
yeah. All right. So let's look at Florida. You mentioned them. They're a big state. What, third, fourth largest population wise in the country. How do they handle it? I get it. I'm concerned as well about the mechanics aspect of this and the circuit clerks having sufficient resources, space, et cetera. How did they deal with that? When they implemented that, did they appropriate more money to the circuit clerks to handle that, for example?
I'm not sure what they did on that part, but Secretary Byrd's a great friend, really good guy down there in Florida, does a good job. They are able to process theirs on the front end.
Yes,
prior to,
we can here.
Right. We can't start until 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock on Election Day. I know it well.
So, yeah, that takes a little bit of time. That's how Florida and other states are actually
yeah, they've got it
earlier with their results because they can process them beforehand. So that's another thing that we should probably deal with later on. But
yeah.
That's kind of how you get that quick result out of Florida. We don't do that, which is a little bit of a delay. We still do a pretty good job, I would say, on election night.
But we don't get overwhelmed with the number of absentee ballots the way they do because they have the no excuse voting.
But if I remember correctly, I think roughly 70% of Floridians voted before Election Day in the last election.
Yes.
So it's a massive number.
But they have a longer period, do they not?
They do. So if you say, well, do we have that switch from Election Day to early voting, you better nail down those logistics.
Agree.
Because it's going to be a nightmare.
Completely
for our
agree with that. I completely agree with that.
So we've got to deal with that.
And you are right, because I got curious and researched this about there's no evidence that early voting and no excuse absentee voting actually increases voter turnout. Pew Research actually did a report on that. Mm-hmm. They're a pretty reputable research firm. In fact, their finding was just the opposite. They said that the overall turnout decreased, and they attributed that to there's just no build-up, the enthusiasm of the big bang of Election Day.
Well, and they also say, well, man, I got these 15 days. I'll do it tomorrow.
Exactly right.
I'll do it tomorrow.
That's exactly what they said.
Tomorrow. Oh, my gosh, Election Day was yesterday, and I forgot.
So, on the other hand, they did say same-day registration, which is a whole other can of worms, that increased overall turnout.
So that's an issue, too, one that I addressed last year and suggested that we move from 45 days down to 30 because technically Mississippi has 15 days of same-day registration right now. Because you have 30 days to register to vote. Absentee voting starts 45 days out. There's a 15-day window I can walk in and register and then do my voting, and that's a question.
Okay, so one concern, one thing I would say about this particular proposal from Senator England that I think actually improves election integrity is that in this case, you go to the circuit clerk's office, you're handed a ballot, you scan your ballot just like you do on Election Day. You see your ballot being harvested, being captured, being accounted for, stored in that machine. Right now, as you know, the envelope, the signature gets stuck in a box somewhere in the circuit clerk's office. And I'm not saying that there's anything nefarious going on, but it opens up the door for problems. You don't actually see your vote being accounted for, right?
Yeah.
You're relying on that.
And the second thing is you got to show your ID. A lot of folks have talked about that. I got to go in the clerk's office. I got to show my ID so they can have the picture ID and make sure that I am who I say I am.
Absolutely.
You cast your ballot. It goes into a locked ballot box. You've got seal logs. You got other ways to make sure that that's kept clean. One of the things we talked about actually this morning, Carl Kirkpatrick, our Assistant Secretary of State of Elections, and Colby Williams, our policy guy.
Yeah.
On the regulatory side right there, let's make sure that two people are involved in that, not just a clerk.
I completely agree with you.
But perhaps the head of elections commissioners.
It should be the same as when we're pulling those ballots out.
That's exactly right.
Can you stay? Or you got to go?
I think
I got one more. You stay for half a segment. I got another question for you on the other side of the break. I got a question that made me think about this as part of this bill coming up, and get your take on that. Secretary of State Michael Watson is our guest in the Element Well studio. We're coming right back. With Secretary of State Michael Watson. Once again, want to pass on that Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann did pass out in the chamber, presiding over the Senate earlier today. What we've heard since then is that he's conscious. Seems to be okay. That's about all we have at this point, and we appreciate the Secretary for offering a prayer as we kicked off our interview. So we were talking offline about just something that occurred to me, and I thought about perhaps a way to mitigate the risk, and the risk is this, that right now when you absentee vote, it's all paper, and the ballots, according to our law, are not scanned until we close the polls on Election Day.
Right.
Different from Florida, by the way, which is processing all
before.
And that's why you've seen this. Why does Florida have their tally before Arizona does? Because Arizona has laws like ours.
Right.
They get gazillions of mail-in absentee ballots that they can't even open until...
And more reasons.
There's crazy stuff going on, too. I'm not discounting that.
Right.
But the big distinction is Florida is processing, counting, tallying electronically all along as votes are being cast during the absentee period. And so by the time they start counting the votes cast on Election Day, they just add those up. Boom, that's the tally.
That's right. And
in Mississippi, if we were to be overwhelmed with manual absentee ballots, we may find some delays. And I agree with you. You're right. Our elections folks are great at getting all those absentee ballots that are just
fantastic
paper documents that they scan. My concern is that during that 45-day period when folks are coming in or mailing in their ballots, and they're just stored in a box, right, in the envelope awaiting Election Day on the circuit clerk's premises, that we could experience, God forbid, some sort of loss, catastrophic loss of this office. Somebody could literally walk out with the boxes of the ballots to never be found again. And we don't have any protection against that's the point.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit in the break there. And one of the things I recall, we had a hurricane during election season a couple of years ago. So it's not that far-fetched of could this happen.
Okay.
I was in, I can't remember which county I was in this year on Election Day, but I stayed purposefully the entire night and watched them close up the ballot box, watched the procedure to make sure everything was done correctly.
Yeah.
So you've got two folks that have to sign off. They basically pull the jump drive. They've got a tape that came out of the machine. So in this instance, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head because you brought that up. Yeah. What if you've got the election commissioner, the head of the election commission comes in, they take the tape. The circuit clerk takes the jump drive. So you got two people, two separate folks.
Yeah.
You've got the seal logs. They recorded all the numbers, et cetera. Again, we probably need to think through this a little bit more.
Yeah.
Just off the top of my head, you got two folks then that have separate recordings of the same numbers on the same day, started over the next day.
I'm with you.
We can think through that, but you're right. I think that's the piece of the logistics that I encouraged the chairman last year to think through those. I've, as you well know, I've done an 82 county tour with our clerks. We had legislators in our office this morning with poll books, machines, to show them the entire process, to let them understand this is what it may look like, to give them kind of a hands-on feel, got them to vote. I think Britney Spears won the best artist in Mississippi, but maybe, who knows where that came from. Jerry Rice won the best football player. But anyway, so, again, the logistics are so important. We've got to make sure we nail these things down.
I agree. It's just something that crossed my mind. I realize it's low risk, but we should always be thinking about any risk whatsoever. And we don't want to have a situation where, well, heck, we have a problem with the election here because a circuit clerk's office had their ballots destroyed and we can't account for them. Now, in many cases, it may not even matter because they know how many came in, and
That's
even
right.
if there's a candidate behind based on the tally, I get all that. But you could have one that's real close where, what's in those boxes makes a difference.
Well, and the idea that we have seen tied races.
Right.
Every single vote counts, and you've got to protect that. And we've done such a good job. Again, give the credit to the legislature on election integrity over the last 5 years. We cannot undercut that with maybe making a mistake with early voting.
Completely agree.
Got to get it right.
So maybe as a stepping stone, we could convert our mail-in and present excuse-based absentee ballot voting, I should say, to the process that you described, where we would have some sort of backup. That would improve that at a minimum.
Right.
Seems like that's pretty straightforward, and streamline the process on Election Day as well.
100%, and that's what it takes. It takes smart people thinking through this and talking through it together.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we got a lot of smart people in the state that can help with that kind of stuff.
We do.
We're blessed in that respect. I know you got to go. We appreciate you coming in, as always, Secretary of State Michael Watson. And thanks again for offering the prayer to start us off. We certainly want our Lieutenant Governor to fully recover and that he's checked out and good to go. Appreciate that.
Appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you, Secretary of State Michael Watson.